The mining station on 442B had seen better days. Its metal corridors echoed with the constant hum of recycling systems, struggling to maintain breathable atmosphere in the thin air of the distant planet. Commander Sarah walked through the main corridor, her boots clanking against the grated floor as she reviewed the daily reports on her tablet. The station housed 237 beings from 12 different species, all working together to extract rare minerals from the planet's crust. It was a testament to the Galactic Mining Consortium's ability to bring different worlds together, even if that unity was built on profit margins and quotas. Sarah paused at the observation deck, looking out at the barren landscape beyond. The planet's atmosphere was barely 20% oxygen, far too thin for most species to survive without assistance. That's why every being on the station carried personal atmosphere regulators, small devices that filtered and concentrated the available gases to match their biological needs. A commotion near the residential sector caught her attention. Raised voices, the kind that suggested panic rather than anger. Sarah quickened her pace, her hand instinctively moving to the emergency communicator on her belt. The scene that greeted her made her blood run cold. A small crowd had gathered around something on the floor. As she pushed through the assembled beings, a mix of tall, crystalline, and the bulky, fur-covered, she saw what had caused the distress. A young girl, no more than 8 years old by human standards, lay on the metal decking. Her small, delicate frame was convulsing as she struggled to breathe. Her skin, normally a soft blue-gray color, had taken on a darker, almost purple hue. Her large, silver eyes were wide with terror as her tiny hands clawed at the damaged atmosphere regulator strapped to her chest. "What happened?" Sarah demanded, dropping to her knees beside the child. One of the supervisors spoke in his crystalline voice. The child was playing in the lower maintenance tunnels. Her regulator was damaged by falling debris. We cannot repair it quickly enough. Sarah's mind raced, required a much higher oxygen concentration than what the station's atmosphere provided. Without her regulator, the girl would suffocate within minutes. The child's breathing was already becoming more labored, her small chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow gasps. "Get a replacement regulator from medical," Sarah ordered. "The nearest compatible unit is in the main hub," replied an engineer. "It will take at least 15 minutes to retrieve and calibrate." 15 minutes. Sarah looked down at the dying child and knew she didn't have that long. The girl's eyes were beginning to flutter closed, her struggles becoming weaker. Around them, other beings stood helplessly. Their own regulators were specifically calibrated for their physiology. Sharing them would be impossible. The wrong gas mixture could kill both the giver and receiver instantly. But humans were different. Sarah's species had evolved on a planet with diverse atmospheric conditions. Their lungs were remarkably adaptable, capable of processing a wide range of gas mixtures that would be toxic to other species. More importantly, human regulators were designed with manual override capabilities, a feature born from their species' tendency to explore dangerous environments. Without hesitation, Sarah began unfastening her own regulator. "Commander, what are you doing?" His voice carried a note of alarm. "Saving her life," Sarah replied simply, her fingers working quickly at the clasps. The crowd murmured in shock. What she was proposing was unprecedented. No species had ever successfully shared atmospheric equipment across biological barriers. The very idea seemed impossible. Commander stepped forward, her large paws gesturing frantically. "The atmospheric differential will kill you both. Human and respiratory systems are completely incompatible." Sarah looked up at the assembled beings, her jaw set with determination. "Maybe, but she's definitely going to die if I don't try." The girl's breathing was now barely perceptible. Her small body had gone limp, and her skin was darkening further. Sarah could see the panic in her silver eyes, the universal look of a child afraid and alone. She finished removing her regulator and immediately felt the thin air of the planet hit her lungs. It was like breathing through a straw, possible, but not sustainable for long. Her hands moved quickly to the girl's damaged unit, assessing the extent of the damage. The primary filtration system was crushed, and the oxygen concentrator was completely offline. But the basic delivery system was intact. If she could jury-rig a connection between her regulator and the girl's delivery system. "I need tools," she gasped, already feeling the effects of the thin atmosphere. Wire strippers, micro-welders, and a portable power cell. Several beings rushed to comply, though their movements seemed sluggish with disbelief. Sarah's vision was beginning to blur slightly at the edges, but she forced herself to focus on the technical challenge ahead. As the tools arrived, Sarah began the delicate process of rerouting her regulator's output to the girl's intake system. It was complex work, requiring precise connections between systems that were never designed to work together. Her hands shook slightly from oxygen deprivation as she worked. The other beings watched in tense silence, some offering suggestions, but most simply staring in amazement at what they were witnessing. "This is madness," whispered one of them. "She's gambling both their lives on untested technology." But Sarah wasn't listening to the doubts. She was focused entirely on the small, fragile being before her. The girl reminded her of her own niece back on Earth, the same delicate features, the same trust in the eyes of an innocent who believed adults could fix anything. The makeshift connection was nearly complete. Sarah's breathing was becoming labored now, her body struggling with the inadequate atmosphere. But the girl showed signs of improvement. Her color was slowly returning to its normal blue-gray, and her breathing was becoming less desperate. "Almost there," Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The final connection snapped into place with a soft click. Sarah activated her regulator's override system, manually adjusting the output to provide the highest possible oxygen concentration. It was far from perfect. Her equipment wasn't designed for physiology, but it might be enough to keep the girl alive until proper help arrived. The change was almost immediate. The girl's breathing deepened, and her eyes fluttered open with renewed alertness. Color continued to return to her skin as the improvised system delivered life-giving oxygen to her starved cells. But Sarah was paying the price. Sharing her regulator meant she was now receiving only a fraction of the oxygen she needed. Her vision tunneled, and she felt herself swaying as her body began to shut down non-essential functions. The girl's small hand reached up and grasped Sarah's wrist. When their eyes met, Sarah saw something that transcended species barriers, pure gratitude, and a child's simple understanding that someone had risked everything to save her. "Thank you," the girl whispered in accented standard, her voice barely audible but clear. Sarah smiled, even as darkness began to creep in at the edges of her vision. Around them, the crowd of beings stood in stunned silence, witnessing something they had thought impossible, one species sacrificing itself for another, with no expectation of reward or recognition. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the corridor as the medical team finally arrived with proper replacement equipment. But as they rushed forward with their supplies, everyone present knew they had witnessed something far more significant than a simple rescue. They had seen the true nature of humanity, not the aggressive, territorial species that many believed them to be, but beings capable of extraordinary compassion and self-sacrifice. Sarah's actions would be remembered long after the immediate crisis had passed, becoming the foundation for something much larger than anyone could have imagined. 3 weeks had passed since the incident in the residential corridor, and the mining station had transformed in ways nobody could have predicted. The story of Commander Sarah's sacrifice had spread beyond the station's walls, traveling through communication networks to reach every corner of the galaxy. Sarah stood in the medical bay, undergoing her final checkup after her ordeal. Doctor, the station's chief medical officer, a tall being from Prime, clicked his mandibles in approval as he reviewed her test results. "Your recovery has been remarkable, Commander," said, his translated voice carrying notes of professional admiration. "Most beings would have suffered permanent neurological damage from such severe oxygen deprivation. Your species' adaptability continues to surprise us." Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on the small figure sitting on the adjacent medical bed. Lyra, the girl she had saved, was swinging her legs back and forth, chattering excitedly to her father in their musical native language. The child's recovery had been even more remarkable than Sarah's within hours of receiving proper atmospheric support. She had bounced back with the resilience that seemed universal among young beings. "She asks about you every day," said Lyra's father, approaching Sarah with obvious gratitude in his large silver eyes. "She calls you her air-sharing sister. It's a term of deep respect in our culture." The phrase touched Sarah more deeply than she cared to admit. In the weeks since the rescue, She had received countless messages from across the galaxy, beings from dozens of species expressing their amazement at her actions. But somehow, this simple title from a child meant more than all the formal recognition combined. What truly amazed Sarah, however, were the changes happening throughout the station. The incident had sparked something unprecedented in galactic history, genuine interspecies cooperation that went far beyond mere professional courtesy. The first sign had been subtle. Engineers began sharing their specialized tools with technicians, despite the significant differences in their manipulator appendages. Supervisors started taking extra care to ensure that work assignments considered the physical limitations and strengths of other species, rather than simply focusing on efficiency quotas. But the real transformation became apparent when the first emergency arose after the rescue. A critical coolant leak in the lower mining levels had threatened to shut down operations completely. In the past, each species work crews would have handled their assigned sections independently, often working at cross purposes due to poor communication and different methodologies. This time, something extraordinary happened. Led by the engineer who had witnessed Sarah's sacrifice, the different species formed integrated teams, used their crystalline bodies' natural resistance to heat to work in high-temperature areas, while strength was employed to move heavy equipment. Though with their multiple arms, performed complex repairs that would have taken other species much longer. The repair work that should have taken 3 days was completed in 18 hours. More importantly, not a single being was injured, a stark contrast to the usual casualty reports from such operations. "It's remarkable," observed Chief Engineer, a gruff human who had worked on mining stations for over 20 years. "I've never seen cooperation like this. It's as if your actions showed everyone what was possible when we actually worked together." Sarah wasn't entirely comfortable with being credited as the catalyst for the station's transformation. She had simply done what seemed necessary at the moment, save a child's life. But she couldn't deny that something fundamental had shifted in the way different species interacted with each other. The change wasn't limited to the station, either. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy of similar cooperation between species that had previously maintained purely professional relationships. A rescue ship had shared their medical supplies with a stranded human colony ship, despite the medications being extremely expensive and difficult to replace. Traders were offering extended credit terms to struggling agricultural cooperatives, with no expectation of profit. Most remarkably, the Galactic Council had received a flood of proposals for joint research projects, cultural exchange programs, and cooperative exploration missions. Species that had maintained careful diplomatic distance for centuries were suddenly eager to work together. "Commander," interrupted a soft voice. Sarah turned to see Lyra approaching, holding something carefully in her small hands. The child spoke in halting standard, her accent thick but her words clear. "My mother, she made this for you. It's a breathing charm. We make them for people who share air with us." She held out a delicate crystalline pendant, no larger than Sarah's thumb. It seemed to glow with internal light, shifting between blue and silver as it caught the medical bay's illumination. "We believe that when someone shares their breath with you, they share part of their soul," explained, his voice heavy with emotion. "This charm is made from compressed atmospheric crystals from our. It will always carry the essence of air." Sarah accepted the pendant with hands that trembled slightly. She had received many gifts since the incident, formal commendations, artwork, even offers of honorary citizenship on various worlds. But this simple charm, made by the hands of a grateful mother, felt more precious than all of them combined. "Tell your mother I'm honored," Sarah said, carefully fastening the chain around her neck. The pendant felt warm against her skin, almost as if it were alive. As she looked around the medical bay, Sarah realized that the real gift wasn't the pendant or the recognition, or even the survival of both herself and Lyra. The real gift was what she was witnessing throughout the station, beings from different worlds learning to see each other not as alien species to be tolerated, but as individuals deserving of care and sacrifice. Doctor approached with her discharge papers. "You're cleared for full duty, Commander, though I suspect your duties may be somewhat different now." He was right. Earlier that morning, Sarah had received a communication from Admiral Harrison, her commanding officer back at Earth Central Command. The content had been both thrilling and terrifying. The Galactic Council has requested that you participate in the formation of a new interspecies cooperation initiative, the Admiral had said. They want you to help establish protocols for joint operations, emergency response, and cultural exchange. It would mean leaving the mining station and traveling to various worlds to implement these programs. It was an incredible opportunity, the chance to help build something that could fundamentally change how species interacted throughout the galaxy. But it also meant leaving behind the life she had built on the mining station, and more personally, saying goodbye to Lyra and the other beings she had grown to care about. As if sensing her thoughts, Lyra tugged on her sleeve. When Sarah looked down, the child's silver eyes were bright with excitement. "Father says you might go to many worlds," Lyra said. "Will you teach other people the air sharing?" Sarah knelt down to the child's level, considering her words carefully. "I don't think I can teach people to share air the way we did," she said. "But maybe I can teach them to share other things, kindness, understanding, help when someone needs it." Lyra nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. "That's good too. My grandmother says the best gifts are the ones that keep giving to other people." Looking into the child's trusting face, Sarah felt her decision crystallize. The mining station had been her home, but perhaps her real purpose lay beyond these walls. If her actions had truly sparked something positive across the galaxy, then she had a responsibility to help nurture that spark into something lasting. Around them, the medical bay hummed with activity as beings from different species worked side by side, their interactions marked by a courtesy and genuine care that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah knew that this moment, this evidence of what was possible when beings chose to see beyond their differences, would stay with her forever. The transformation had begun with a single act of compassion. Where it would lead, nobody could say for certain. But for the first time in galactic history, the future seemed to hold the promise of something truly extraordinary, a universe where species differences were seen not as barriers to overcome, but as strengths to be shared. 2 years after the incident on 442B, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the ISV Harmony, watching the blue-green swirl of Prime grow larger in the ship represented everything the Interspecies Cooperation Initiative had accomplished, a vessel designed and built by 12 different species, incorporating the best technology each civilization had to offer. The bridge crew reflected this same diversity. Commander sat in the captain's chair, his crystalline form catching the light from the navigation displays. At the helm, Engineer worked alongside Doctor, who had requested transfer from the mining station to join the initiative. The sight of them working together, sharing tasks and responsibilities without regard for species barriers, still filled Sarah with quiet satisfaction. "Approaching standard orbital insertion point," announced, her massive paws dancing over controls designed to accommodate her unique physiology. "Traffic control is clearing us for descent to the capital city." Sarah felt a familiar flutter of nervous excitement. Today marked the completion of her most ambitious project yet, the establishment of the first Interspecies Emergency Response Academy on Prime. Representatives from 47 different worlds had gathered to participate in training programs designed around the principles that had emerged from that day on the mining station. The academy would teach more than just technical emergency procedures. Its core curriculum focused on what Sarah privately called compassionate cooperation, the ability to see beyond species differences during crisis moments and work together with a shared commitment to preserving life. "Personal message for you, Commander," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. "It's from the Academy." Sarah accepted the data pad, expecting another logistical update from the Academy staff. Instead, she found herself looking at a video message that made her smile despite the formal setting. Lyra's face filled the screen, though she had grown significantly in the 2 years since their first meeting. Now 10 years old by human standards, she had developed the confident bearing of a child who had found her place in the world. Behind her, Sarah could see other young beings, a mix of species she recognized and some she didn't. "Hello, Sarah." Lyra's standard had improved dramatically, though her accent still carried the musical quality of her native language. "I wanted to show you what we've been doing here at the Academy while we waited for you to arrive." The camera panned to show a group of young beings working together on what appeared to be an emergency shelter. Sarah recognized the design. It was based on specifications that could be adapted for the environmental needs of multiple species simultaneously. This is, Lyra continued, introducing a young whose fur was still the lighter shade that marked childhood. He taught us how to make the structural supports stronger. And this is, she indicated a small whose crystalline body sparkled with youth. She showed us how to make the power systems more efficient. The camera returned to Lyra's face, which was bright with excitement. We call ourselves the Young Responders. We're learning how to help people like you helped me, not just with breathing problems, but with all kinds of emergencies. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. The children were naturally embracing the principles that many adult beings still found challenging. To them, cooperation across species lines wasn't revolutionary. It was simply the way things were supposed to work. Message ends, Torres announced. Academy Director is also requesting a priority communication when you're ready. Sarah nodded, though part of her wanted to replay Lyra's message several more times. Instead, she made her way to the communications center and activated the secure channel to the Academy. His familiar silver eyes appeared on the screen, though like his daughter, he had changed over the past 2 years. His role as director of the Academy had given him a confidence and authority that made him one of the most respected figures in the initiative. Sarah, he greeted her with genuine warmth. I trust your journey went well. The council representatives arrived this morning, and they're eager to observe the demonstration. The demonstration referred to was the culmination of 2 years of careful planning. The Academy had developed training scenarios that pushed interspecies cooperation to its limits, requiring participants to work together under extreme pressure while dealing with the kind of life-or-death situations that revealed the true character of individuals and civilizations. Any last-minute concerns? Sarah asked. She had learned to trust judgment implicitly, but the importance of today's event made her want to double-check every detail. Only one, replied, his expression becoming more serious. We've received word that the hegemony is sending observers. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The hegemony was a loose alliance of species that had remained skeptical of the initiative's goals. They believed that interspecies cooperation was a naive dream that would ultimately weaken individual civilizations by making them dependent on others. More troubling was their recent behavior. Reports had been coming in from the frontier regions of hegemony interference in cooperative missions, including several incidents where they had actively prevented species from working together during emergencies. What's their stated purpose for observing? Sarah asked. They claim they want to evaluate the initiative's training methods for potential adoption, replied. But intelligence sources suggest they may be looking for weaknesses to exploit. Sarah considered this information carefully. The hegemony's presence would add an element of tension to the demonstration, but it might also provide an opportunity. If the training scenarios could convince even the skeptics that cooperation was superior to competition, it could represent a major breakthrough for the initiative. Let them observe, Sarah decided. Maybe it's time they saw what we've really accomplished. 3 hours later, Sarah stood in the Academy's main observation gallery, watching as the demonstration began in the simulation chambers below. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the gallery, their conversations creating a complex harmony of translated voices. In one corner, she noticed the hegemony delegation, a group of beings whose body language suggested they expected to be disappointed by what they were about to witness. Their leader, a tall, angular being from VII, kept checking a data pad with obvious impatience. The simulation began with a scenario designed to test every principle the Academy taught. A space station had suffered catastrophic damage, leaving survivors from multiple species trapped in different sections. Rescue teams had to coordinate their efforts while dealing with environmental hazards that affected each species differently. The training participants included recent graduates from 47 different worlds. Sarah watched with growing pride as they seamlessly formed integrated teams, each playing to their species' strengths while compensating for others' limitations. Used their heat resistance to work in damaged reactor areas, while strength cleared debris that other species couldn't move. Precision was employed for delicate electronic repairs, while human adaptability allowed them to work in areas where atmospheric conditions would be fatal to others. But the real magic wasn't in the specialized skills each species brought to the rescue. It was in the way they communicated, shared resources, and made split-second decisions based on what would save the most lives rather than what would benefit their own people. "Impressive choreography," commented the delegate, his tone suggesting he viewed the demonstration as nothing more than an elaborate performance. "But how do we know these beings would act the same way in a real emergency, when their own species' survival might conflict with the needs of others?" Before Sarah could respond, alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the academy. Real emergency signals, not part of the simulation. "All personnel to emergency stations," came the announcement. "We have received a distress signal from a civilian transport carrying refugees from the system. The vessel is experiencing critical system failures and will crash in approximately 20 minutes if not assisted immediately." Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she recognized the implications. The system had been evacuated due to solar instability, and the refugee transports were carrying beings from at least 8 different species, all with different environmental and medical needs. In the gallery, the various delegates turned to each other with expressions ranging from concern to curiosity. The hegemony representatives seemed particularly interested in how the demonstration would be affected by this real emergency. "Director to all Academy personnel," came the next announcement. "This is not a drill. We are implementing immediate emergency protocols. All training participants are to assist with rescue operations according to their certified specializations." Sarah watched as the beings who had been participating in the simulation immediately shifted gears. There was no confusion, no hesitation about whether to continue the training exercise or respond to the real emergency. They simply moved from simulated rescue to actual rescue with the same seamless cooperation they had demonstrated moments before. The Academy's communication center became a hub of organized activity. Technicians worked with human engineers to calculate the most efficient rescue approaches, while pilots prepared shuttles equipped with multi-species medical facilities. But the most remarkable sight was in the Academy's main coordination center, where Lyra and her young responders had taken positions alongside adult professionals. The children weren't getting in the way or asking questions. They were actively contributing to the rescue effort, using skills they had learned through the Academy's program. "Refugee transport, this is Academy Rescue Coordination," came Lyra's voice over the communication system, clear and confident despite her youth. "We have your position and are dispatching multi-species rescue teams. Can you provide a breakdown of passenger species and current life support status?" The response came through with static and interference, but the message was clear. 237 refugees representing 8 species, with life support failing for all environmental zones. Without immediate assistance, the transport would lose life support entirely within 18 minutes. In the observation gallery, Sarah noticed the hegemony delegates watching the rescue coordination with increasing attention. The representative had put away his data pad and was focused entirely on the organized chaos below. The rescue launched with efficiency that would have impressed even the most experienced emergency responders. 6 shuttles departed the Academy, each one specifically configured for different species needs and crewed by integrated teams trained in interspecies rescue protocols. But the real test came when the shuttles reached the failing transport. The refugee ship was larger than anticipated, and its failing systems had created environmental zones that were hostile to multiple species simultaneously. Areas that were safe for some beings were lethal to others, and traditional single-species rescue protocols would have left dozens of refugees to die. Instead, the rescue teams implemented the principles Sarah had seen demonstrated countless times since that day on the mining station. They didn't just work around each other, they actively supported each other, with some species risking exposure to dangerous conditions so that others could reach refugees who would otherwise be inaccessible. The coordination was flawless. Rescue specialists used their heat resistance to reach refugees trapped in overheated compartments, then immediately transferred them to medics who could provide appropriate care. Strength was used to clear blocked passages, while human adaptability allowed rescue workers to operate portable life support systems in areas where the ship's own systems had failed completely. Most remarkably, when it became clear that the transport couldn't be saved, the rescue teams made a decision that would have been impossible under traditional single-species protocols. They voluntarily destroyed the ship's remaining life support systems to prevent a catastrophic explosion, trusting completely in their ability to evacuate every single refugee before the systems failed. The last shuttle returned to the Academy with 0 casualties among the refugees and only minor injuries among the rescue teams. 237 beings from 8 different species had been saved through the kind of cooperation that the hegemony insisted was too idealistic to work in practice. In the observation gallery, silence had fallen among the delegates. The representative stood quietly for several minutes, studying the rescue coordination displays that showed how seamlessly different species had worked together under genuine life-or-death pressure. Finally, he approached Sarah. "Commander," he said formally, "I believe we need to discuss the possibility of hegemony participation in your initiative." Sarah looked around the gallery at the faces of beings from dozens of worlds, all of whom had just witnessed the same thing. They had seen cooperation that went beyond mere professional courtesy or diplomatic necessity. They had seen beings from different species choose to risk their lives for others without any expectation of reward or recognition. It was the same spirit that had driven Sarah to share her breathing mask with a dying child 2 years ago, now across entire civilizations, and proven under the most demanding conditions possible. "I think," Sarah replied, "that would be a very good discussion to have." As she spoke, she noticed Lyra and her young responders gathered around the rescue coordination displays, already analyzing the mission and discussing how their procedures could be improved for next time. To them, this hadn't been an extraordinary event. It had simply been beings doing what they were supposed to do for each other. Looking at those young faces, Sarah realized that the real victory wasn't in convincing skeptics or establishing new protocols. It was in creating a generation that would never question whether beings from different species deserved to be saved. They had grown up in a universe where compassion crossed species lines as naturally as breathing, and they would carry that understanding forward to create something even more extraordinary than what Sarah's generation had begun. The initiative had started with one human sharing her air with one alien child. Now it was becoming the foundation for a galaxy where such sharing wasn't remarkable at all. It was simply the way civilized beings treated each other.